Do you remember the special words that the pastor says when they're breaking the bread and preparing the wine for communion? Do this in remembrance. This weekend, we have the opportunity to participate in communion at all of our services here at Victory, and it's always a special time, but I think especially so during this season of Lent, where we're especially focusing on Jesus' final time on earth, and of course, looking back towards what we call the Last Supper, where Jesus ate with his disciples and broke bread with them, and that's where he said, "Do this in remembrance of me." So it's always a special time whenever we are able to receive communion. But this weekend during Lent, I think it's even more of a time to reflect on why he said those words, what we should be thinking about because of the remembrance part of the sacrifice that he went on to give for us. So it's a special time, a sacred time. And throughout Christianity, composers have been thinking about music that should be used during that time in the worship service. Usually the pieces are slow, kind of contemplative. Sometimes there's a lot of chromaticism to kind of give us that uncomfortable feeling. Sometimes there's pain associated with thinking about the sacrifice and things, but always just beautiful, worshipful pieces. And they're given very basic titles. A lot of composers, specifically French composers, they just like to use the word communion. There was no doubt about what they meant the purpose of this piece to be. And in Italy, they would have it for the elevation. They would write a piece to be used during the elevation. And so composers all over for hundreds and hundreds of years writing music for this sacred time during the service. Now, Girolamo Frescobaldi was a 16th century Italian organ composer, and he wrote a collection of pieces specifically for organ to be used during the Mass. Now, a lot of times there would be choir and things, but he wrote this for organists who needed to provide music when he didn't have help, maybe, or maybe he just had a cantor and they would have to alternate. So there's a lot of rich music in this collection that we have still used as inspiration today as to what might it have looked like if you'd gone to church on a Sunday in Italy way back then. And one of the pieces that he's written in each of these Mass settings is a toccata to be used during the elevation, during communion. And we hear the word toccata in our modern ears. We probably think, oh, that's loud and bright and whatever. Literally, it just means to touch. And so it's just basically another word for a piece to be used during communion. And in Italy, they have this beautiful stop that's meant to imitate the human voice called voce umana. Now, I don't have one of those on this organ. In a lot of more contemporary instruments, we have something called a celeste, and it does a similar thing, not to the same effect, but it's two stops together, and they kind of try to mimic this vibrato sound that you would make if you were singing. Let me play an example for you. So here we have just the wood principle on the swell. And then if I add the celeste, you'll hear it suddenly have a little shimmer. Do you hear that? Wah, 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 wah. Now, if you've played an instrument or you're a tuner, you'll be like, it's out of tune. Yes. In fact, it is just ever so much out of tune to give it a little shimmery effect. Just like if a voice is singing vibrato, here's the pitch, they're going a little bit under and over it. So yes, there is a little bit of mistuning, but it's for a beautiful effect. And so I'm going to play for you this beautiful chromatic toccata by Frescobaldi. I want you to take some time during Lent and see what you remember as you think about communion and doing it in remembrance of that sacrifice that Jesus made for us.